Hello everyone, and welcome to my deep dive on the lore of Alisa. This is a summary of the story based on my observations, the in-game notes, and context clues in theory crafting. I should note that this is my interpretation of the events preceding the game, and the meaning behind the events of the game, and can be subject to change as more games in the series are made. Please feel free to share your theories and thoughts in the comments. I love discussion and to compare and contrast notes, and it would greatly understand the story and themes of the game. Without further ado, let's begin. The St. Johannes Institute was a medical institution founded by the head doctor Pierre Edmiston for the sake of medical research and for the therapies and treatment for mental health. Considered an asylum to those outside of the premises of the facility, it was not such for those who found themselves admitted to the institution. Dr. Edmiston was not a doctor of psychology or psychiatry, but of standard medical procedure and technical engineering, and created many technological marvels, such as the tooth wheel and an elevator system for the Institute's doctors to use. He was also involved in medical experiments on many of his patients, which was brought to question by members of his own staff. This coincided with the eventful downfall of the facility as times grew tough. A drought of patients led to the near fall of the St. Johannes Institute, until a benefactor came in the form of the House of Tides, bringing with him an artifact of considerable importance, which was considered the true birth of the St. Johannes Institute. The Finger of God, a strange stone obelisk with a self-explanatory description, was donated to the Institute under the Order of the Tides, along with instructions for experimentation. The stone itself had a dark power. One of the employees handling it, while it was being brought inside, lost a hand in the process by merely laying it upon the object. It was to be used in the medical experiments going forward by exposing subjects to it. Around the time, 3 new patients of note were admitted to the Institute for care. Edith Boileau, a fallen star of the theatrical arts, who had entered a dramatic depression. Isabella Flora, a once well-respected biologist and overprotective woman who loved caring for and researching plants. Upon being admitted to the Institute, she took a liking to the backyard garden, and a young man of unknown origin who had trouble communicating, except when using a hand puppet, which had a similar appearance to him. His name was Pole. He had an affinity for playthings, mechanical toys, and dolls in particular. While speaking through his puppet, Pole seemed to share an exaggerated version of his own personality, which was ever more friendly and helpful, and was fascinated by Dr. Edmiston's contraptions. Once the test began, it was soon found that too much exposure to the artifact would cause death and petrification, almost on a level of fossilization, and slowly, numerous patients died over and over in failed experiments, much to Dr. Edmiston's and his staff's dismay. The House of Tides, however, was more encouraging of their endeavors, despite minor protests by the staff. More experiments were done until a breakthrough had finally come to pass. Isabella had gained the ability to preserve her expansive garden. Upon this discovery, Dr. Edmiston changed his goals into the possibility of reviving the dead as a way to transgress his failures in the many deaths of his patients. Pole also began to succumb to his exposure, his body becoming twisted and mutilated, seemingly dying while under the watch of one of the doctors. After his death was reported, his body was found to be missing, with reports of something moving around inside the walls beginning to follow. By this time, the events of the experiments were proving more fatal. Isabella's skin began to transmute into metal, which hindered her movement. She was implanted with tooth wheels to help her move. Her garden too began to transform into metal, growing jagged and sharp, cutting into the flesh of those who drew near. They themselves began to suffer the same fate as Isabella and her plants, as metallic seeds and roots grew within them. A madness began to bloom within the metal woman, and Isabella began to see everyone as opposition to her and her plants, taking a key to the Institute's doors with her, and fleeing to her metallic haven as the garden was locked up to keep others out. Edith's exposure had caused her flesh to begin to petrify. However, she had found herself to have gained the ability to control water, wherein she began to flood the water therapy rooms and basement sublevels. Many of the petrifying patients took to the water, finding it more soothing to swim about in the constricted flooded underchambers, begging and praying for a return to the ocean. There were complaints of the flooding before the sublevels were, too, completely locked away, as Edith began to repair her damaged, decaying body with porcelain and glass, adapting to her new semi-aquatic habitat. Dr. Emerson, too, was succumbing to madness, driven by a dark force feeding on his failing psyche, taking joy in the deaths of his patients, calling it fun. His subordinates and staff locked him away in the medical wing of the facility to keep him from harming anyone else, preferring to let him play in his own personal funhouse. It wasn't long before the earth began to rumble, and the ground beneath the institute gave way to an unnatural sinkhole, devouring the building and grounds and imprisoning everyone else within. Slowly, the remaining survivors began to succumb to madness themselves, killing each other or dying of natural causes due to the lack of supplies. The St. Johannes Institute became a tomb of the damned, under the power of the finger of God. The creature that was formerly Pole thought himself to be the last living being within the building, heard a voice within his mind, christening him as the new master of this place. He soon realized it to be the voice of the artifact, and had discovered his true powers. He was blessed with the ability to create life, using the tooth wheels that Dr. Emerson had made. Creating simple mechanical facsimiles of humans, he found that he could also take the bodies of the dead and use them as components and spare parts for other more elaborate and mutilated creations. To him, the dead humans resembled dolls, fallen and broken, that he could fix, so he wouldn't be alone any longer. The doll master, as he now went by, sequestered himself within the walls once again to explore his new domain. He found that he could change and rearrange the layout of the facility, making it start to resemble a dollhouse. It didn't take him long to discover an insane Dr. Emerson alone in the medical wing. He remembered the doctor using him for experiments, and saw him to be broken. It would be quite easy to teach him some manners by disassembling. The dollmaster easily dragged away a screaming Emerson, took him apart, and reassembled him with tooth wheels and marionette strings, making the doctor his perfect puppet. With a new plaything, he retooled the medical wing into a fun house for his new toy. When he reached the basement, he reincorporated it into his dollhouse. The petrified still wandered the waters, now resembling glass figures with visible skeletons, and were easily implanted with tooth wheels to become a part of the collection. The chapel was remade, the only connection to the surface with the bell tower being visible above the ground, and the finger was enshrined within as a centerpiece to everything. A strange statue, possibly depicting the god which the finger originated, was also erected. A combination of Pegasus and human that sat at a similar spot to a church's altar. Slowly, over the years, people traveled upon the area in which the St. Johannes Institute lay buried. Illegal miners even tried to excavate the area for profit, only to discover the metal garden and that another group, more than likely the House of Tides, wanting their artifact back, had sent in their own miners, only to be attacked and turned by the metal monstrosities that lurked within the cavern. Others who stumbled upon the sinkhole were taken by newly minted collector's dolls and repurposed into more and more playthings for the dollmaster's entertainment, until it got rather dull. The dollmaster wished to play more games with his toys, setting up elaborate puzzles and hiding clues based on old notes around the house. Everything was complete when he recreated his old hand puppet. Those who found themselves trapped would need a guide, and his persona Pole was reinvented to help play the part. He even turned another victim named Charlotte into a helping cabinet to hold his playthings, accessories, and weapons. During the time between the downfall of the Institute and the setting of the game, a small town was established in the same woods. It was attached to the wider country and empire by the rail system. Settlers began to populate the area, and one in particular was a small family of a father, a mother named Barbara, and their daughter Alisa. The mother was overprotective of her daughter, which didn't bode well for the inquisitive and explorative girl. This persisted in age, and the mother would usually want to go wherever her daughter went, until one day, on a walk in the nearby forest, met with the two stumbling upon the sinkhole. It wasn't long before they were captured by deformed dolls and were brought inside, separated. Both players in a dark game. Alisa managed to adapt quickly to the events of the game. She had been armed with a handgun and learned quickly how to use it, as the denizens of the house didn't hold back hostilities towards the girl. She had discovered pole and tooth wheels to give herself a better fighting chance. Her mother, on the other hand, gave in to the horror. meeting Pole as well. However, he had a much more different offer. She wished for her daughter to be returned to her, and that she would never leave her side. Pole had granted her wish by making her a permanent resident of the dollhouse, and Elisa's first real challenge of the home. Elise was quickly subdued and brought to the dollmaster. She, too, was turned. However, her will still remained within her new body. Years had passed, and the father of the family grew more concerned about his missing wife and child, and other people from the town went out into the woods to find them. Every so often, one or more not returning from the excursion. Those who didn't had fallen into the dollhouse. It wasn't long before the searches ended, and the father had given up on ever finding them, spending his days alone as the town attempted to go back to some form of normalcy. Since then, new visitors to the dollhouse had dried up, and seeking more playthings, the dollmaster had sent Elise up to the surface to find more. The looming figure of her mother was to bring her back if she fled. It didn't take long before she had found her former home. She wished to seek out her father. Attempting to reach him, Barbara saw this as an attempt to flee, and cornered her within the village. Elise ran to the train tracks down the road to escape, but found herself losing an arm as her mother grabbed her and brought her back to their new home. The priest of the local church witnessed the event, seeing Barbara as a devil, concluding that the land the village sat on was cursed. He had locked up the church and left the following morning. The village fell in hard times to follow due to the missing people and the shutdown of the church. They decided to leave too, fleeing back to the imperial cities for employment, and just to be safer in a larger community. Slowly homes were abandoned, leaving most belongings and locked up to rot. The only one to stay, the aging father, alone with his sorrows. Not too long into the future, a humanitarian, Albertus Alvarez, came upon a plot by the Empire. Weapons of mass destruction that sought to endanger the lives of the innocent, all laid out in a simple set of blueprints. Alvarez stole the documents and fled, knowing that his life was at risk for his selfless act, slipping onto a supply train to a remote area and continue his journey on foot to reach a resistance movement that wished to abolish the Empire. It didn't take but a day for the Emperor's crows to be on his trail, one such special forces operative being the titular Alisa, who along with her partner Jean were let off at the station of the small town. They both discovered the old father of Elise, who claimed to have met the fugitive they were looking for. He had stayed for a cup of tea and left for the woods. The two crows followed suit, coming upon Alvarez, who quickly fled. Alisa and Jean gave chase, only for Jean to fall and claim he swallowed his toothpick, leaving Alisa the only one to continue pursuit. Chasing Alvarez into an increasingly foggy forest, she witnessed him fall, and upon reaching his location, discovered the old sinkhole. She carefully dropped in, and was quickly overwhelmed by collectors and dragged underground. Another plaything for the dollmaster. Upon waking up, she found herself to be in an old Victorian dress, and discovered a note, along with a gun and key in a night table, and began an investigation. She quickly found the residents of the mansion to be hostile, and didn't waste time pointing a gun at Pole upon first meeting. With the help of Pole and her training, she was the first to make it to the end of the funhouse, slowly discovering the history of the mansion in notes left as clues. Alisa even awoken a sleeping Barbara, who proceeded to chase her around the mansion afterwards, finding a similar aspect of her daughter in her. She encountered a death machine controlled by a mad doctor, Pierre Edmiston, who the crow dispatched with ease. Upon his defeat, his lifeless body sprayed tooth wheels, and was lifted away by the puppet strings that worked it upon a return to one of Pole's rooms. She was met with an eerie surprise. A hand puppet in the shape of Dr. Edmiston. It would appear as if he was rebuilt into it. Pole and the Edmiston puppet performed a show for Alisa, and gave her the option to accept tooth wheels into her body as upgrades. Whether or not she accepted them is unknown, but there are possibilities involving them later. Alisa soon discovered the flooded basement and the original petrified patients of the St. Johannes Institute, and found the doll form of Elise, whom, during her years of stay in the dollhouse, was attacked and damaged by the other dolls, and requested Alisa assist in retrieving her lost leg, taken by them. Elise revealed she was Alisa's generous benefactor, who gave her the gun and later helped in the fight against the now monstrous Edith, who had gained the ability to summon glass weaponry and fish. After the fight, Barbara appeared and snatched her away. Despite reclaiming her daughter, this didn't falter in her search for Alisa. After the defeat of Edith, Alisa gained access to the metal garden in the backyard of the mansion, Fighting her way through the metallic plant people who stalked it, she made it to the throne of Isabella, who saw her as a usurper ready to steal it. Isabella also saw that Alisa was privy to swords, and participated in a fair duel of skill, and was defeated. She couldn't believe she had been bested, thinking her home was now lost, only for Alisa to apologize and take the key she had on her hip. As after Alisa left the room, she was shown what Isabella saw in her worldview. A beautiful garden of clear blue skies, green shrubs, and colorful flowers aplenty. She lamented the fact that it wasn't real, and only an illusion. A sentiment that Alisa agreed with, as both Isabella's spirit and the vision faded back to the garden. All the while, Alisa was exploring the dollhouse. Albertus Alvarez had his own venture. He had awoken in another part of the house, and had discovered the horrible power of the finger of God through notes. Realizing he was trapped inside the mansion, using part of the blueprints, he attempted to create a powerful chemical bomb. Understanding that it might be enough to destroy the artifact and get him out of here. Using the rooms he could access, he set up a lab to construct the bomb, easily creating the outer shell. He needed to scavenge the other components and chemicals from the rest of the house. On one of his excursions from his makeshift workstation, he had caught Alisa trying to reach him through a library door. Knowing she would take her mission over listening, the little man gloated about both being the same in this predicament before fleeing at the sign of a doll approaching the crow from behind. He too had trouble getting past the porcelain monsters that lurked in the halls, but his intentions of getting out of here served him well, just as with Alisa's mother. The doll master made a more subtle approach. Alberta still had fear, and was easily swindled into a dark deal with the alleged mastermind of the house. Power, protection from the Empire, all of his humanitarian thoughts or actions, smothered by the false potential to be the king of this mansion. His new home that in a day he had grown accustomed to. The finger fed on this, and he too was subjected to an operation by the doll master, making him but a toy of a king. He was even granted his own mechanical bodyguards, who operated with new automatic weapons of the time. The other dolls feared his power now, as he began to lay waste to any opportunist who tried to steal his new power from him. Alisa soon learned of Albertus' fall as she reached the chapel and avoided his bodyguards. He revealed himself in his new kingly attire, gloating about his newfound power, and revealed his new clockwork advancements. Despite this, Alisa tamed one of the bodyguards and used its machine gun in their bout, and after a long fight, Alisa emerged victorious to a remorseful Alvarez. He revealed the nature of the finger, the house, how they were trapped, and the location of the bomb he was working on to end the ordeal and escape. He died revealing the atrocities of the Empire and his regime. Alisa tried to affirm her stance on the Emperor before she went on to complete the bomb, locating the final components around the mansion. The doll master wouldn't have this. He bided his time and waited for this moment. If nothing else can get Alisa to break, he must do it himself, with the power she gave him through the tooth wheel she traded. Once the bomb was complete, Alisa returned to the chapel, now cloaked in a crimson fog, while the finger of God gave off an unearthly glow from inside its case. Alisa planted the bomb and set the timer, only for a familiar hand puppet to drop to the floor behind her. Turning, she witnessed the true face of the doll master, a horrible twisted creature of abstract proportions, his head like that of a hand puppet, perfect for his role as the artifact guardian, and the false ruler of this tomb. The doll master taunted Alisa before attempting to disassemble her, to teach her better manners. He attacked with inhuman strength, and summoned his mechanical creations with the help of tooth wheels, and could regenerate from his wounds. After a long fight, the doll master fell, unsealing the entrance. Alisa fled from his creations, flooding the room, as the monster pondered how she could resist such power. He was covered by his collectors before the bomb detonated, causing the sinkhole to collapse in on itself. Alisa lay in the woods until her partner Jean arrived. He hunkered down with her in a home in the abandoned village, revealing that he didn't swallow his toothpick, before she awoke again in her apartment in the Imperial City. She discovered a note about the truth of the blueprint she sought in the dollhouse, shocked at what she learned. A tooth wheel, which she still had from her quests, rolled off as if with a mind of its own. However, alternatively, if she had accepted any of the upgrades from Dr. Edmiston, she wouldn't have been able to escape being bound to the dollhouse thanks to the tooth wheels in her body, and she was dragged away by the collectors while being taunted. The bomb still detonated, destroying the chapel, the artifact, and presumably the doll master, and the sinkhole, as well as trapping her in the subterranean hell. Alisa would sit alone, her body half transformed into a doll. when there was a sudden stir. The force that kept the house submerged underground had disappeared thanks to the destruction of the finger of God, and it resurfaced. Dolls piled out, and each were shot one by one as they left the old mansion by a lone sniper who got another target in his sights. It was Alisa, who crawled out and walked away from the scene, spared by the sniper, who was revealed to be Jean. In another interpretation, Alisa brought Elise's removed leg to receive one last upgrade. This one caused her mind to become consumed by the power she was given. Seemingly becoming the new chosen protector of the artifact, she placed the bomb in the doll master's mouth, taunting him, and going with the collector dolls to a safe haven as the bomb exploded, destroying the sinkhole and chapel with everything inside. Later, a fully transformed Alisa was bowed to by her new doll subjects, taking a seat with both the pole and pier puppets, now the new master of this place. There is also another alternate. After receiving every upgrade and returning Elise's leg, after becoming the new master, Alisa walks to Alisa's chamber, bestowing upon her the crown that was seemingly worn by Alvarez after his fall. Upon accepting the regalia, Barbara reveals herself, seemingly the true master of this timeline. Depending on the ending, it can be surmised that the finger is destroyed in every one, and that it causes the house to rise. It is quite possible that Barbara would be left to be the real new master if Alisa successfully escaped the mansion. A lot of the powers that the bosses use are sold by Dr. Edmiston, showing that they are all brought about by the powers of the finger of God. And Albertus Alvarez found new life as a secondary creation of the doll master, similar to Pier Edmiston, in the form of a little cherub that could be purchased and follow Alisa around, showing that he can easily create new things from the old and destroyed. So this was my lore breakdown on what I think happened before and during the events of the game. I am open to sharing notes and thoughts, so leave a comment, because I want to have a discussion so we can pin down the lore of this game. Thanks for watching, and if you haven't played Alisa yet, go play it! It's awesome and really does deserve more attention and appreciation.